Hey guys, welcome to Friday Q&A for another week. Big week coming up. I'm headed off to the States next week for the Boston Amp Show and Axe Fest, so I will be there. If you're going to be there, come and say hi. I'd love to meet so many of you guys. And as always, if you have questions for next week's Q&A video, I'm going to try to knock that one out just before I leave. Hopefully, fingers crossed, but I'll make no promises. So if you got questions for the next Q&A, whenever that is, please get them in the comments below, and let's get into this week's questions. Do I know any of the members from 12 Foot Ninja? Well, for a starter, those guys are from the other side of the country, and Australia's a pretty big country, so it's already highly unlikely, but I actually don't. However, I do remember when they were nowhere near as big as they were now, and they were playing a bunch of small venues over here in Perth. I remember when they came out and checking out their first video that went really big, and I couldn't believe that people were making music like that. So I would love to get to know those guys because I really like the band, and I've tried to catch them the few times they've come over here, and it's just always clashed with other gigs that I've got going on. So no, but you know, as always, the more the merrier when it comes to stuff like that, especially music. Could I make a playlist of all my Q&As? That is an excellent idea. I will link it in the video description, and I will do my best to keep it updated. I might just update it every month, or I'll try to remember, make a habit of it, to update it after every Q&A I do. But I also try to do that with timestamps, and I always forget. So this video will have timestamps and a list to all the other Q&A videos. I think there's 30 odd so far, so we'll keep those rolling, and if there's any questions that I didn't get to in this video, I might have got to them in some of the others as well, so check that out. Can I do a guitar showcase video? This is a bit of a vague question. If you want me to show you all my guitars, that's something that I've been working on. If you watch my Sensitive Sundays videos, which are just me mindlessly indulging and playing guitar solos over cheesy backing tracks, I try to use a different guitar from my collection on that every week. So that's kind of my subtle way of getting a bit of a showcase thing happening in there. But I do have a video planned just around some of my favorite guitars and the guitars that I've done a lot of recording with and a lot of playing with. So there'll be some stuff like that coming up. If you guys want to see more guitar specific stuff, please let me know. This is something that's very easy to overlook, and it applies to using a real amp and using a modeler. Basically anything that you do, the speakers that you use for playback, whether it be at a live concert where you're using a PA or you're in the studio using studio monitors, do have a big effect on what you hear. In the studio with studio monitors, a lot of the time, you know, using better, however you choose to quantify that, normally amounts to being able to hear more detail. So sometimes you might play on, you know, higher spec studio monitors, and you might like the sound less because you can actually hear more of what's going on in there, and the speaker's flatter and it's a better representation of what is going into it. Whereas you might find on some studio monitors or some PAs which are nowhere near flat, you actually really like the sound because they're cutting and they're accentuating certain frequencies. I find the Atom A7X monitors that I've got here in my room do a pretty good job of being relatively neutral, so that if I dial in a sound that I like here at home, it translates pretty well to the studio and it translates pretty well to live. And my approach is always just, you know, I factor that in. Different PAs sound different, and if there are tweaks that have to be made, it's way easier to do them at the desk rather than try to have, you know, one preset or one patch, or even if you're miking your guitar amp, you know, it's going to sound different in different rooms. So yeah, your playback system is a huge factor in the final thing. And you know, it always kind of makes me laugh when I see somebody they've just gone and spent a bomb on like a brand new Kemper or an Axe FX3 or something like that, and they talk about how they're not getting tones that they like, and then you say, well, what are you playing them back on? And you know, they're playing them back on like a set of 5-inch KRKs, or they're just playing them on a generic set of like Dell computer monitors or something. So yeah, invest in good monitoring. So I mentioned the Zoom modeling stuff last week, and thank you to Johnny from Anarchy Audio for suggesting he's got one of those units. So I'm going to try and borrow that off him when I'm back from the States and make some videos with them. I will say with this question though that you know, don't let your perceived playing ability or progress on the instrument impede what you think you should own. You know, if you've been playing guitar for 6 months and you've made a little bit of progress, but you still consider yourself a beginner, don't let that stop you buying good gear, because in my opinion, good gear makes it easier to get better. You know, you're not fighting these structural things with the instruments, you know, like an action that's this high or an amp that you can't get an inspiring tone. I always look at gear as having two main functions. It's a tool. So if you're a professional or you're an advanced player or intermediate player, you need these tools which let you do certain things and help you realize the sounds that are in your head and that are coming out of your guitar and your fingers. But gear should also be inspiring, and that's a whole quest with guitar tone. You're always looking for inspiring guitar tones. So don't tell yourself that just because you haven't been playing for a certain amount of time that you don't deserve a piece of gear. If you can afford to own it, get the best gear that you can afford. So, there's no reason to say, hey, I've only been playing for 6 months, I should only get a Zoom. If you've got the money there, go and get a Fractal, or, get some great plugins, or get an interface, or get an atomic amplifier or something like that, or get a Zoom and explore it and really get into it. And if you're happy with it, if it sounds good to you and it's inspiring you, that's the most important thing. I am not a PRS artist endorsee at the moment, although I do love my PRS guitars. I actually got my first PRS when I was in high school. It was a gift from my dad, and I still own it. And I've played that guitar on hundreds of shows, and it's been around the world. And my SC245, which is easily my favorite guitar. I think it's the guitar I most closely identify. If I had anything like a signature sound, it would be happening on that guitar. But yeah, that is subject to change. I would love to be a PRS artist just because I really like their products and I'm happy to pay for their stuff, and I'm happy to promote their stuff because it's great gear. They have a very well-deserved reputation. But yeah, I said at the moment, so watch this space. That is definitely subject to change, and it's something I might be working on at the moment. Well, thank you for asking. I'm very well. I'm obviously excited to be going away next week and to meet a bunch of you guys over in the States. That also means I'm going to be crazy busy for the next week, but a little bit of break over Easter, always good. Hey, life's good with me at the moment, so that's good. Regarding low wattage amps, I've been a fan of these for a long time. Basically, I remember my buddy Troy got an orange Tiny Terror, and I thought nothing of it until I played it, and it's like, hey, this only has 3 knobs, but it's putting out a lot of heat. And when you chuck it on a recording, just chucking a 57 on the little 1x12 cab with that amp, we ended up using that amp a lot on the first few Ragdoll EPs, and it's still a sound that we still reference. We were in the studio this morning doing something, and it's sort of like, oh, we're going for that sort of Tiny Terror sound. What can we get that with? Which it's really, I think the orange stuff, it has this really nice kind of grit to it that blends really well with other amplifiers. And I did have a Dark Terror until recently. I sold it to one of my ex-students, and they're getting a whole lot of use out of it in the studio, which is awesome, and I gigged that amp for a long time. One of my favorite low wattage amps, though, is the Stereotone Son of Yeti. That thing is incredible. It's almost my perfect hot rod Marshall, but it's only 22 watts using 6v6s. As for smaller amps, I don't have a lot of experience using anything under like 10-15 watts, like the 5 watt stuff, but one of my favorite guitar sounds of all time is Jimmy Page's early Led Zeppelin tone, and that's like a Telecaster into a tiny little Supro. So, and that's like iconic gargantuan guitar tone. Even though the guitar on its own, if you were to isolate it, doesn't sound big, it works in the context of Led Zeppelin being such an iconic band. So yeah, you don't need like a 1500 watt quadruple rectifier just to get a good guitar sound. Low wattage amps that you can actually crank up and get a bit of power amp distortion and sag are probably the way to go. And a movie that I've seen recently, I rewatched Snatch last night. I absolutely love that and Lock, Stock. They're two of the funniest movies I've seen in a long time. I saw them as a teenager, and my wife and I and my dad, we all watched it last night while we were eating dinner, and yeah, it's still got it. Those movies stack up really well. Would recommend if you haven't seen it. So I will admit, when I saw this question, I thought they were referring to somebody else. I went and checked out the channel, LambChopper678, and it wasn't. There's another guy I see a lot on Facebook, and his name eludes me, but he's an incredible Aussie metal guitar player. Plays a lot of Dimebag stuff, and he's got a bunch of original stuff. I need to remind myself who that is. But yeah, this Lamb Chopper guy, I was unaware of it, and it's pretty amazing, all the metal stuff. His Rust in Peace covers, like anything off that album, are very, very impressive, and I got a lot of respect for anybody who puts in that much work to covering Megadeth, because Megadeth in particular are really hard to cover, but there's all the great Lamb of God and Metallica stuff on there, so it's great to see another heavy Aussie YouTuber, going really well. He's got like 75,000 subs, so he's obviously doing something very, very right. I have heard all about the Revv stuff. It's pretty hard to miss if you're a guitar nerd like I am at the moment, because there's so many great sounding demos floating around, and so many of my favorite players have done demos or are using the Revv stuff, but I have not had the chance to check them out. I would really, really love to, especially their new Lunchbox head. You know, the collaboration they've done with Two Notes with the built-in reactive load and the IRs. I think that's pretty awesome. I need to check if they're going to be at the amp show, because if they are, I'm going to go and say hi and try out some of their amps. Before we go this week, I figured I would chuck in a little music recommendation. 3 albums or songs or releases each week I'm going to do. So the first one, you should go and check out the new single from a Perth-based band called Chaos Divine. They're mates of mine, and I was really lucky to be around when they were basically auditioning. They auditioned so many amps before they went and did some recording, and the guitar tones on this thing are amazing. The writing's amazing. If you like heavy atmospheric prog metal with great vocals, just great writing all round, really tasteful playing and production, go and check out the new Chaos Divine single. I'll put a link to it in the video description. Second, you should definitely go and check out the brand new Devin Townsend album, Empath. Is that how you say it? I've actually never said that out aloud, but what more can I say? Devin is actually a genius, and it's one of the best heavy albums I've heard in a very, very long time. So that one's awesome. And for something a little bit different, you should go and check out a group called The Midnight. They're a synthwave band. I really like their early stuff, but they did an EP last year or the year before. Go and check out the track Crystalline, because it's just like all my favorite 80s movie soundtrack rolled into one thing. They're really great. So yeah, there's my music recommendation for this week. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Hopefully there will be a video next week. If not, it will be coming, well, it won't be coming the week after that because I'll be in the States. So I will really, as I said earlier, I'll do my best to get the next Q&A out as soon as possible. So if you got questions, please chuck them in the comments here, and I hope you guys have a great Easter break, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.